Hey, Phil here, welcome to another Star Trek Discovery video. Now, if you saw my video from about 5 months ago when I talked about Star Trek Discovery's continuity inconsistencies with what we knew had been established from previous Star Trek series, Star Trek movies, etc., the general continuity stuff, then you'll know that it grated on me a little bit, Star Trek Discovery's seemingly blasé attitude to establish continuity. Not enough to make me hate the programme. I actually quite enjoyed Star Trek Discovery in the end, much to my surprise based on the first 2 episodes, but by the end I actually really enjoyed it. But it doesn't stop the fact that the little inconsistencies niggled at me slightly still. And it just so happened that when I was browsing through the internet, I came across some information about a newly published Star Trek Discovery novel. Now, I haven't been a massive Star Trek novel reader. I think I've read about 10 over my entire life. The last one, I think, was probably over a decade ago. I'm not really heavily into the expanded universe side of Star Trek. But what intrigued me about this particular book is a comment that I saw in, I think, one of the reviews, which said that this book goes a long way to explain some of the inconsistencies that Star Trek Discovery has presented. That piqued my interest, and so I thought, I have to read this book and find out if that's an accurate review. That book is Star Trek Discovery Desperate Measures by David Mack. So, I've read it, my first Star Trek book in a decade. I'm not here to review the book, but I will say it's quite a good book. It's an exciting adventure, and it's a lot of fun. But hey, I'm not here to review it. I'm here to talk about whether or not it solves any of these continuity inconsistencies which the show itself had brought up. So, we're going to go, I went through I've read the whole novel, and I picked out anything that I thought could potentially reference it, and I'm going to tell you about them now so that you don't have to read it if you don't want to. Now, disclaimer, I do know that print fiction of Star Trek is not considered canon. I know this, but from what I gathered from a little bit of research, the writers of the first batch of books for Star Trek Discovery did have access to all the Season 1 scripts, so it's at least accurate to Season 1. Whether or not it gets contradicted later, who knows, but for now, it's the best we've got, so I'm going with it. Now, the first thing I'll say is that for a book that somebody had put in the review that this solves a lot of the continuity inconsistencies, I would say it didn't actually reference a lot of them that much, but it does reference some. So let's get started. Now, this book is a prequel to the TV series Star Trek Discovery. It's set during Burnham's time on the Shenzhou, and it involves the Shenzhou teaming up with the Enterprise under the command of Captain Pike, which, as you might already be guessing, is how we get some explanations of some of the inconsistencies, particularly the visual ones of different looks of ships, different looks of costumes, those kind of things. And that is the main bulk of where this does some work in explaining the inconsistencies. You're not going to get anything about the Klingons in this book, okay? So if you're here for an explanation of why the Klingons look different, it's not in here. But we do get a lot of the surface level inconsistencies explained. Some of them not explained, but still kind of in here. Let's get to it. So the beginning of this book starts in the prologue bit. It mentions that it's about a year after the Enterprise's first mission to Telos 4. So that's the events of the Cage, the unaired pilot. So this takes place a year after that in terms of where Pike is. So we know that it's after that. We know in terms of the original series continuity, that the costumes that they had on the uniforms, I should say costumes, they had on the Enterprise around that time were the Pike ones we saw from that. So that's our sort of basis in terms of where it comes in the timeline. Now, in terms of continuity crossovers with the original series, there is a mention of the USS Intrepid in this book, which is a completely Vulcan crewed crew. And that is something from the original series that's mentioned in the episode Immunity Syndrome, where Spock feels telepathically all of the crew die. So there's one little continuity link there. And we first see the Enterprise come into this story in Chapter 4. So there's sort of 3 areas where they do touch on stuff. And that's the look of the ship, the look of the costumes, and Spock's relationship with Michael. And those are the three things that I did bring up in my continuity inconsistencies video. In terms of the looks of the ship, there's not that much reference, to be honest, in terms of the different looks of the ships. There's a reference to the fact that somebody mentions that the Constitution class ships unusually don't have a captain's ready room adjacent to the bridge. And that is portrayed in this book as something that's very unusual, and that, I suppose, explains away why there wasn't one in the original series, but there has been on future Star Trek series ships and in Star Trek Discovery. The second reference to the look of the ships being different is the transporter room. Spock beams aboard the Shenzhou at one point, and he notes that their transporter room is much bigger than the Enterprise's and has a much darker ambience. And in terms of explanations of why these things were different, there is only sort of briefly touches on it in sort of a throwaway line more than anything else. On page 118, let's see if I can find it. Spock noted marked differences in the interior of the Walker-class ship from that of the Enterprise. Aboard the Shenzhou, the greys were darker and the bulkhead's orientations more angular. It was clear to him that the two ships had been designed and constructed in different eras according to very different aesthetic standards. Such drastic changes in such a short span of time was not unusual among the humans of Earth, though it had proved a constant source of amusement among the Vulcans and Andorian allies. So there you go. So it's a throwaway line, but it basically just says, hey, humans change their mind on aesthetics really quickly. And I suppose that's true. And that's all you get. That's all you get for explanations of why the ships look different. And that's all you get in terms of the explanation of the differences as well. I suppose there's an explanation. So what about the uniforms? In terms of the uniforms being different, there is an explanation in this book for that. In chapter 12, on page 157, the book mentions that the Enterprise's uniforms are a new design and have so far been only issued to Constitution-class ships, which does give a perfect explanation, I suppose, to why the Enterprise that we see in the Cage have vastly different uniforms from the same era uniforms in Discovery. I say perfect, it's not perfect, of course, at all, because this book is set at least a year before the TV series, and so far everyone still seems, that we've seen in the TV series, still seems to be in the Discovery style uniforms. I mean, how long does it take to roll out a new uniform design? It can't take more than a year or two, surely. But hey, let's see how long they keep it for, shall we? I'll see if they start to edge that way in the TV series. They've offered an explanation, at least. One thing that it makes no attempts to explain at all is the difference in technology that we have seen between the original series and the Star Trek Discovery. In particular, my one major bugbear was the hologram technology. I mean, it simply wasn't needed. I don't know why they felt they needed to include that in the TV series, because you could have absolutely done without it. And I get the arguments of, oh, hey, it needs to look modern and things, and to appeal to a new audience, and I totally get that. I get why the consoles can't look like they look like in the original series, but the holographic technology, Battlestar Galactica managed fine without it, and that was really successful. You can make a modern looking sci-fi without holographic technology. That was not needed, and they shoved it in there, and it had no particular benefit to the plot or anything. It was purely aesthetics, and it was unneeded. And yet they did it anyway, and this book completely glosses over that. It doesn't even attempt to explain it. There's one bit where the Enterprise is definitely transmitting a holographic signal, because it comes up, Pike's holographic face comes up on the Shenzhou, but there is no return hologram. They never mention the Enterprise seeing a hologram, so hey, maybe the newer ship isn't outfitted with that technology, but they make no attempts to even explain that in this book. And the last issue I suppose it deals with is Spock's relationship to Michael. One of the things that I raised in my previous video was, why have we never heard Spock mention Michael before? I mean, it's a bit weird if you got an adopted sister that you grew up with to never mention her at all. Bit strange. But in this book, it's established that they didn't really grow up together. Yes, Spock was the son of Amanda and Sarek, and yes, Michael was the ward of Sarek, and had a lot of interaction with Amanda. But she apparently, according to this book, did not live with them. She did not grow up with Spock in a kind of sibling relationship. She had met him once or twice, I believe, which, you know, kind of goes some way to explain why he would never have mentioned her. They actually kind of, for the first time in this book, form some kind of bond because they are forced to work together. So I suppose actually this book, in a way, solves and creates a continuity inconsistency because he doesn't mention it after this. But it's clear from this book that he doesn't view her as a sister. He views her as a ward of his parent. But there's also this aspect, which is particularly highlighted on page 364 of this book, that he finds it difficult to accept aspects of her relationship with his parents, particularly her relationship with his mother, who he feels in this book didn't give him the love because she wasn't allowed to, and then Michael got it instead. So perhaps that's why he didn't talk about her. But there's at least a couple of different explanations that make sense in this book for that. And that's kind of it. That's all this book really covers in terms of explaining the inconsistencies. So I don't know if the bold claim that this solves a lot of the inconsistencies established in Star Trek Discovery is a fair enough claim, because it kind of tangentially covers a couple. And hey, it's a book anyway, so they'll probably contradict it next season. But there you go. You don't have to read it now. If you were tempted to read it to find out what those explanations were, because you've seen a similar thing, then there you go. I've just told you. You don't need to read it. You're welcome. I don't know when I'll be doing another Star Trek Discovery video, but I will certainly when it relaunches again, I will be reviewing the next season, and I might do some more videos in the meantime. But I do cover other sci-fi things like Doctor Who and things, and other pop culture TV programs, movies, books, and that sort of stuff. So please do like, share, I can't even say the word, share, subscribe, and that kind of stuff for more of that. And thanks for watching. Bye.